with a riot. As the Cato Institute would later record, it was one of the biggest riots in New York City history. As many as 10,000 demonstrators blocked traffic in downtown Manhattan on September 16, 1992. Reporters and innocent bystanders were violently assaulted by the mob as thousands of dollars in private property was destroyed in multiple acts of vandalism. The protesters stormed up the steps of City Hall, occupying the building. They then streamed onto the Brooklyn Bridge, where they blocked traffic in both directions, jumping on the cars of trapped, terrified motorists. Many of the protesters were carrying guns and openly drinking alcohol. Yet the uniformed police present did little to stop them. Why? Because the rioters were nearly all white, off-duty NYPD officers. They were participating in a Patrolmen's Benevolent Association demonstration against Mayor David Dinkins' call for a civilian complaint review board and his creation earlier that year of the Mullen Commission, formed to investigate widespread allegations of misconduct within the NYPD. In the center of the mayhem, standing on top of a car cursing Mayor Dinkins through a bullhorn, was mayoral candidate Rudy Giuliani. Dinkins described the ugly protests the following day during a press conference.
But some of them out there yesterday who were calling out, for instance, why would the people of our communities have confidence that they have the capacity to handle a tense situation in a minority community?
I'm sure that you can guess the ugly racist slur we bleeped out, which was hurled at the sitting mayor of New York. We euphemize it as the N-word. So when that same Rudy Giuliani, whose seemingly singular goal as the next mayor was to undo everything Mayor Dinkins tried to do, particularly when it came to making policing less onerous and less bullying and less deadly for Black New Yorkers, when he offers condolences to Mayor Dinkins, who died peacefully at his home last night at age 93, less than 2 months after the death of his beloved wife, Joyce. You should take that with the same seriousness you give Rudy's legal maneuvers. In fact, if anything, Rudy was the original Donald Trump, the un-Dinkins, just as Trump was the un-Obama. Designed as if in a laboratory to put white grievance against an historical Black elected leader into human form. Mr. Dinkins, would you please be my mayor? That is a line from my favorite song by my favorite hip-hop group, A Tribe Called Quest, and he was our mayor, the first Black mayor of New York City, the barber's son, elected in 1990, a year before I graduated from college. Dinkins sought to bring dignity and decency to a New York whose previous mayors, from Fiorello LaGuardia to Ed Koch, had been known for their harshness, and to a city that was being ripped apart down racial and religious lines, with Black, Italian, Jewish, and Korean communities seemingly in a state of constant war. It was the New York City depicted in Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing in 1989, the year the Central Park Five lost their liberty for a crime they did not commit. The New York City where the murders of Michael Griffith in 1986 and Yusuf Hawkins by mobs of young white men in 1989 made Bensonhurst and Howard Beach notorious for young Black New Yorkers. We knew not to set foot in those neighborhoods if we valued our lives. Dinkins brought a genuine concern for the poor and the homeless to a city that faced a crisis of both. On the day after famed tennis champion Arthur Ashe announced that he was HIV positive, Dinkins named the city's first coordinator for AIDS policy, Ronald Johnson, who was himself HIV positive. As the virus tore through the gay community nationwide following years of neglect by the Reagan administration. He welcomed a newly freed Nelson Mandela to America in a triumphant visit that drew some 750,000 New Yorkers, including me, as the South African leader's motorcade crossed through Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. In an era when it seemed like the whole world was at war with Black America, from the Nixon-plotted, Reagan-boosted war on drugs to the plague of crack cocaine and violence on our streets that led directly to the 1994 crime bill, to the indifference and cruelty of the police, Dinkins dared to try to make a difference. And we all paid for his brief but hopeful tenure with the first Trump, the original Trump, the Trump named Rudy. So save your condolences, Rudy. Tell it to Four Seasons Landscaping or whoever you think is hiding 8 million Trump votes in Germany. We don't want to hear from you. Up next, We'll talk with an actual ally of the late Mayor Dinkins, who was a force in New York City back then, and now my friend, the Reverend Al Sharpton.
I think it's, with all due respect to those of you who live elsewhere, I think it's the greatest town in the world. And being mayor of New York is the greatest job there is, save the one that President Obama has.
Former New York City Mayor David Dinkins passed away last night at the age of 93. I'm joined now by the Reverend Al Sharpton, president of the National Action Network and host of Politics Nation right here on MSNBC. And Rev, I met David Dinkins in person because of you. I met him through you. I think he was here to do at 30 Rock to do an interview for your show, and I was so excited to meet him. He was such a great man. What do you remember most about David Dinkins?
Well, I knew David Dinkins since I was a teenager. When I was 16 and started my national youth movement group, he was the lawyer that incorporated us. And down through the years, we maintained a relationship. And sometimes I would argue with him, call him names, and wanted him to be more strident. And it took time to understand that he had such grace even under the most tumultuous circumstances. And I felt he should be more strident. He said, Al, you have to learn how to get the job done, keep your eye on the prize. But I most remember is that when we were facing a police killing of a young man named Amadou Diallo, who in a hail of 41 bullets was killed, with 19 of those bullets, for only going in his vestibule, sticking a key in the door, and the police thought, they said they thought he had a weapon. He was just going home. They were looking for someone else. And Dave Dinkins, when we started protests, every day we would go down to the police headquarters, the main one in New York, and sit in, and hundreds would be arrested. He called me one morning and said, Al, what time do y'all have the demonstrations? He was a former mayor. I said, 10 in the morning. He said, I'm coming down. I said, but we're getting arrested. He said, I'll see you in the morning. And he came down and went to one police plaza where he had been mayor and got on a knee. Way before Colin Kaepernick, he took a knee and was arrested and had them cuff him with Congressman Charlie Rangel and himself and me. And we went to jail fighting police reform that he had started with that Civilian Complaint Review Board. He never left the struggle. He was not one to be loud and boisterous, but he was firm and made real change happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we started off and we could see Charlie Rangel and James Brown and lots of people in the photos that are, I don't know if you can see them, that are coming up as you're talking. And, we started off by really talking about the way that Dinkins was taken out of office by Rudy Giuliani, by this rage that Giuliani stoked that was already there in the police against what Mayor Dinkins wanted to do, which was change policing. I feel like we're kind of having a rerun of that conversation about Black Lives Matter, about whether or not police should be free to kill at will in black communities. He tried to do something about it. What did you take from that fight? Is it dispiriting to think that after great men like this have tried, after you have tried, after we've had all of these movements, we're still fighting about this?
Well, you fight till you win. You don't fight to say the fight is over in a certain amount of rounds. This is not pro boxing or wrestling. You fight till you win. And every struggle has had long struggles. I remember when Nelson Mandela came, which you mentioned, and Dave Dinkins had me as part of the group that went to the UN with him, and Jesse Jackson, all of us. And when I thought about it took Nelson Mandela being in jail 27 years after fighting many decades around apartheid. How could we complain about fighting? We fight till we win, knowing that the victory is certain. And that's what Dave Dinkins would always say. And as I went more national from just doing New York activism, he said, you're still fighting now, keep fighting. He'd come up to our National Action Network rallies. In fact, he was there just a few months ago. We had his 90th birthday there. And we never forgot this gentle giant who had a spine of steel, and he didn't need to be boisterous. He just needed to be effective. And he was the one that broke that ceiling and made people know you could be the CEO of the biggest city in the world and perform. He revitalized Times Square. He started this whole community policing. And in many ways, you are more than correct, Joy. It's almost like to study Donald Trump, you have to study Rudy Giuliani. They took credit for things that their predecessor did, and they used race to try and rev up a political career that ended up embarrassing them at the end.
Indeed, amen. Thank you, Reverend Al. It's always great to talk with you. Reverend Al Sharpton, thank you very much. I also do want to say to the family of Bruce Boynton, who also passed away, rest in peace to him as well, and the best to his family. That's the readout for tonight. All In with Chris A starts now.